One tweet and 32 hours later, U.S. President Donald Trump became the first sitting U.S. president to set foot on North Korean soil. Their handshake undoubtedly one for the books at one of the most militarized borders on Earth. Now, the entire world and South Korean President Moon Jae-in watched as the North Kim offered a U.S. president an extraordinary invitation to cross the border. Now, the entire day was filled with brilliant optics, but will it prove to be the start of a deal or just some nice pictures and pageantry? DMZ and Thereafter begins now.
정전 선언이 있은 후 66년 만에 판문점에서 미국과 북한이 만납니다. 사상 최초로 미국과 북한의 정상이 분단의 상징 판문점에서 마주서서 평화를 위한 악수를 합니다.
With a single tweet and a historic handshake, the world's most heavily fortified border became a landmark of peace and prosperity. The entire world watched as North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump crossed the border together in a show of resolve and commitment.
A lot of bad things happening, and it's changed very, very rapidly, and it's very positive. A lot of positive things going on right now.
이 부정부장의 분기선을 넘어서 자신은 마지막으로는 자치하는 그 과거를 청산하고 앞으로 좋은 만남을 개최하려는 그 부정부장의 그 남다른 영단의 그
Dialogue will continue. History is in the making. So now that the dust has settled and the hours of euphoria calmed, we want to take an in-depth analysis of what happened, what it means, and what to expect from here on. I have two brilliant experts in this field. To my right, Dr. Kim Chang-su, advisor to the Korea Research Institute for National Strategy. Welcome back to the program. It's nice to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And to my left, Dr. Andray Abrahamian, Coret Fellow at the Shorenstein Asia Pacific Research Center at Stanford University, 2018 to 2019, and a North Korea specialist. Andray, we're delighted to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, North Korean leaders are not known for improvisations. Now, U.S. diplomats don't like that either. I can tell you the South Korea's presidential Blue House, that's a no-no. Andray, you've worked in North Korea. How possible is such a last-minute put-together summit?
Well, as I perceive it, some elements of it were very last-minute and put together with just a matter of hours. But I think all three countries were looking at this date and kind of had it circled on the calendar as a possibility. And I think from early June, you started to see some hints that it might be possible. Letters were exchanged between Trump and Kim. Trump called his very beautiful. Kim described his as excellent. Then Kim Yo-jong visited the DMZ to pay her condolences upon the death of Kim Dae-jung's widow.
Right.
The South Korean ministries started leaking or at least hinting at the possibility that there could be a fourth Moon Kim meeting. And I think all that pointed to the idea that something was possible. So I think all three sides were ready to do something at the last minute.
It definitely seemed unchoreographed at the DMZ, as, you know, at least for the journalist. Dr. Kim, what did you make out of this meeting that proved to be far more than the 2-minute hello handshake that the U.S. president had previewed?
I think, this is a very dramatic and last-minute, performance by President Trump and also by President Kim Jong-un. I think this is highly intentional, even though there is a lot of rumors that this kind of performance has been designed and approved by the leaders already for the last couple of weeks. I agree. I buy that ideas because there were a lot of hints coming from his personal note to President Trump and vice versa. So we were, as a matter of fact, among the experts here in South Korea and in Washington, D.C., were speculating there must be some meetings coming pretty soon, because given the personal letters to each other, and also there was some important suggestions coming from each other, as Andray just pointed out. We are buying that. But what's more important right now is this happened yesterday and the day before yesterday. It's a part of our history, and how we're going to move from this point on. That's most important. So don't spend too much time on whether it was a kind of impromptu meeting or it was a kind of premeditated meeting. It's not that much worth right now. They agreed to resume the talks, particularly at the working level meetings, leading up to the summit meeting sometime before the end of this year, which was actually the deadline proposed by Mr. Kim Jong-un after. So that's why we have a lot of time, half a year from now on. So I think, as Mr. Pompeo mentioned briefly, there was going to be a meeting between the two parties somewhere in the mid-July, leading up to another working level, all kind of ministerial meetings.
Absolutely, we need to move on forward and look beyond this. I couldn't tell you what North Koreans were thinking, but President Trump's security team, I know, was against this idea. Now, did the meeting strengthen or weaken the U.S. position, the North Korean position, and the South Korean position?
I don't think particularly in either direction a major advantage was gained. I think perhaps it's better to say that in both Pyongyang and Washington, D.C., there are groups that are in favor of a process of dialogue and there are groups opposed to it. And the people who are in favor of the U.S. and North Korea trying to find a process that leads towards peace and denuclearization and rapprochement, those people are now empowered. This meeting, especially in Pyongyang, I think, validates for Mr. Kim his process of engaging the United States. You could tell in the last couple of months after Hanoi, there's been real uncertainty and instability in Pyongyang. And when that happens, it creates a lot of stress in the system, for one thing. And people become unwilling to stick their necks out. The whole country kind of retreats into a shell. And this has happened a couple times in the past. I think most importantly in 1999, when the US was trying to reach out, the North Koreans unsure about it. They kind of missed an opportunity there, I feel. And it looked like after Hanoi, maybe we were going to enter a long period where North Korea was not going to communicate. What Trump did by stepping across that line was to open the possibility for Kim Jong-un and the sort of pro-engagement North Koreans to take the ascendancy again.
And what about for South Korea? I mean, does it strengthen or weaken South Korea's position?
I would say it would strengthen our position vis-a-vis North Korea and the United States, because we have been pretty much discarded by particularly North Koreans that you're not supposed to play a kind of mediator role or facilitator role. Even though our government made it very clear, we are the one who's going to make a real contribution to playing this game, because no other country, including the United States and China, can really get into the core of the problem, North Korean problem, and the potential problem as a whole, not to mention just the North Korean nuclear issues. So this is a South Korea, North Koreans issue rather than foreign country issue. So I think this is what we are supposed to do, and President really wants to play that particular role again, even though we have been pretty much, buffed and ridiculed by North Korea and many other countries, particularly some other countries as well. But I think it's a tremendous plus for Mr. Moon Jae-in, and we're going to move. And also, I think like the stress is actually Kim Jong-un he saved his face many times. Actually, as Andray mentioned, there was a time, very difficult time in North Korea right after the failure of the meeting in Hanoi. There was internal conflicts in North Korea, whether they're going to move this path or they may change the path again. So I think this is a sign for Kim Jong-un that, okay, Mr. Trump actually came to Korea and meet him and shake hands, and we have some much longer than expected kind of meetings between the two leaders. This is a tremendous boost for Mr. Kim Jong-un, so that he feels very strong, stronger now. And from that strength, I think Mr. Kim Jong-un can really proceed with some other talks with the United States and South Korea. So I think a tremendous plus for Mr. Kim and Mr. Moon, and also for Mr. Moon as well. So it's a win-win-win situation.
Speaking of the failed Hanoi talks, we have been hearing that the North Korean negotiators who took part in the Hanoi talks have been punished. They've actually been sacked from the team, and of course, President Trump, after his 53-minute long bilateral with Kim Jong-un, said that working level talks will resume, that Kim Jong-un had agreed that working level talks between U.S. and North Korea will resume. And I think, Dr. Kim, you mentioned sometime in July. As for the North Korean side, there's got to be some kind of a reshuffle going on that front.
I think the reshuffle is done, and I think it was probably wrapped up around the end of May, and that's when you saw Kim Jong-un start thinking about sending a letter to Donald Trump. And the best guess right now is that Begin's counterpart will be Choi Sun-hee. I've actually seen conflicting reports about Saturday night when Begin flew to the DMZ. I'm not sure if he met Choi Sun-hee or if it was Kim Chang-sun, Kim Jong-un's chief of staff. Regardless, it was Choi who published very quickly the KCNA message, responding to Trump's tweet, basically saying, send us a real invitation and we'll look at it positively. And she's been an important figure in their dealings with the United States for at least a decade and a half. It would make sense if now is the moment to really push ahead with negotiations to have her take a primary role.
Right. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un introduced Ri Yong-ho, the foreign minister, to Trump as being part of the nuclear negotiators who will be facing, I suppose, Mike Pompeo or Stephen Biegun. What were you able to see from that meeting and from those figures who accompanied Kim Jong-un to the DMZ?
I think it is very important that some people actually joined and replacing the people who showed up in Hanoi, because at the time it was basically security and propaganda people, deadline people. But now it's a time of professional diplomats. That means North Korea is willing to be much more flexible in dealing with the United States and South Korea as well, because after all, their counterparts will be all Korean diplomats in the South and in the United States as well. So they're looking for a really proper, really responsible counterparts in North Korea. That is Choi Sun-hee and Ri Yong-ho, all foreign ministry people. I think that's...
and on the U.S. side also, I think it's important that Donald Trump said, Mike Pompeo is part of this. We know you don't like him, but he is the head of the State Department. He's
Pompeo
in charge.
Steve.
And John Bolton was sent to Ulaanbaatar, so he wasn't even in Panmunjom. He had been sent out of the country. So I think the North Koreans will respond well to that.
So going back to normal, I mean, I think that's what their point is.
Going back to the normal process of doing things diplomatically.
That means they in the state it'll take a long time, diplomatic efforts, which cannot be done in a year or two, because it is a propaganda people who can really argue. We can deal with all these problems within 1 year or two, very military style. But it's a diplomatic style, which is much more peaceful, relatively peaceful, but it means it's going to take much longer time, which sounds much more pragmatic, realistic than the propaganda people that we can deal with. We can make one big deal, and within Mr. Trump's presidency, within 2 or 3 years, we can deal everything once and for all. I think this shows that North Korea has become a little bit realistic, listening to Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi Jinping and Mr. Putin, that because there will be a long time diplomatic efforts, so that he can show you can look like a more reliable leader rather than just impromptu and
Do you think we'll need to see some kind of breakthrough this year, though? I kind of think that at least some initial agreement will need to come in the next few months in order to make the process
Because
concrete.
that is a deadline that Kim Jong-un set out for the U.S.
I really hope that some kind of breakthrough happens in the first term. Indeed, the missed opportunity of Hanoi is that time is short. The election season is beginning. Donald Trump has declared his candidacy. Iran is looming much larger in the international stage, taking more of his attention. And next year will really be all about the election. So I worried after Hanoi that if North Korea stayed quiet for too long, we'd miss the window. But it looks like all the leaders recognized that fact and took the chance to restart the process.
The U.S. strategy so far has been trying to keep Kim Jong-un away from the hardline, old school advisors of his. I think the idea here is that because Kim Jong-un is so unique, because President Donald Trump is so unique, you could get this impossible deal done, even though, of course, U.S. intel has been telling them that North Korea's Kim Jong-un is not going to give up his nukes. What are the odds on this? I mean, let me ask you this and put you on the spot, Dr. Kim. What are the odds of North Korea giving up its nuclear weapons?
You mean at this moment, within 10 years, or depending on how long? I think most of people, a majority of people, both in North Korea, in South Korea, and the United States, and elsewhere, they believe it is almost impossible for North Korea to later give up its nuclear weapons and also related program, and also like missiles, unless they got sufficient guarantee of their regime security. So that's why they're demanding, unless you provide a sufficient guarantee that your regime, Kim Jong-un's regime, will be guaranteed, and they will not give up its nuclear capability. But I think this is the art of a kind of diplomacy, giving one by one and quid and pro quo. If North Korea comes up with a list of the next facility they're going to destroy, for example, including the Yongbyon facility, then United States can give some answers. Okay, this is how we are going to guarantee the regime security. And also, in addition to this lifting of the economic sanctions on North Korea. So giving one by one, that's what the Chinese and North Koreans have called gradual, step by step, in parallel. I think Mr. Trump started with a very quick and one big deal idea, because this is in his temperament, and I think he became much more realistic, dealing with many leaders in this part of the world and listening to all the statements coming from Korea and China, and also what is more important is giving advice to him by his staff. Debriefed by all these staff, and he became much more knowledgeable about the Korean situation. I think that's one of the reasons President Trump can become much more pragmatic.
Andray, I want to ask you this. You're the North Korea expert. What are the odds of Kim Jong-un giving up his nuclear weapons, whether it be, in a year from now, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years?
Well, I mean, I'm, I guess, a North Korean expert, and the interesting thing about studying this country, especially where there's relatively little information compared to studying other places, is we can look at the same evidence and draw vastly different conclusions, right? So there are some people who think that North Korea can never change, and that any kind of attempt to build peace with North Korea will fall flat because North Korea has this essential nature, and that means that they can never be trusted, and they won't be able to stick to a deal, and they'll never be able to sort out their human rights or reform their economy. I'm a little more optimistic than that. I think there are other examples in Asia, in the region, of countries that have been a certain way and then drastically changed their outlook on not only how they organize their own societies, but how they interact with the world. And so I'm hopeful that North Korea can be like that. And indeed, if we are talking about North Korea giving up its nuclear weapons, that's only going to happen after its relationship with the United States and South Korea and others is drastically different. And to get to that point, we need to undergo a process that will be difficult and will be slow, as Dr. Kim mentioned. But I think we have to try because the alternatives are worse.
President Moon thanked President Trump for helping in the peace process. Those were his words from the weekend. And that refers to the peace declaration that had been in the headlines for a while. Not so much the peace process towards denuclearization, but the peace declaration that I suppose North Korea wants to sign. South Korea, I'm sure, is with North Korea on that. It looks like it's Washington at this point dragging its feet on that. What will it take for this peace declaration to happen?
You know, because this has been a North Korean's position for the last 50 years. You have to replace the armistice agreements with a new one, a peace treaty between the United States and North Korea, excluding South Korea, because South Korea and North Korea have already signed a very similar treaty between the two. But the concern was, as long as North Korea maintains its nuclear stockpile, there is no guarantee. And there was so many cases in our history that there was a kind of deception by the communists particularly. So until the final kind of approval or final surety that North Korea will no longer have this kind of capability, then we can sign the peace treaty. Because the peace treaty is not just signing one document. It means everything. It means a very big thing. The end of the hostility between the two Koreas, end of the division of the two Koreas, as a matter of fact. So this is a very big thing. So that's why United States has been very clear for the last 30, 40 years. Whenever North Korea raised this particular issue, some people just say, it is very easy. Let's get the two leaders get together and sign a peace treaty and declare the end of the war between the two, and let's do all kind of economic and all kind of transactions between the two Koreas. That's not that easy. It's always easier said than done. So that's why North Korea, even though North Korea has made it very clear that we really want this process, along with the denuclearization, this is a part of their guarantee of their system, unless we are guaranteed by this peace treaty, and also including the removal of U.S. troops from South Korea. Mm-hmm. So having meetings between the two.
You could think about like this maybe, Jen. So I think a peace declaration will be relatively easy, sort of an entry point into creating a peace regime, which will be a system, so the building of a peaceful system between the Koreas and the US, and then finally a peace treaty which will come at the end of this process, which could be many, many years away. I think that's probably how most of the people involved in the diplomacy are thinking about it.
Having studied North Korea and continuing to study North Korea, are you seeing enough changes within that regime for such a dramatic change to happen?
That's a difficult question. Predicting what's going to happen in North Korea is not easy, and indeed it's very easy to get it wrong. You've seen enough changes in the economy, certainly in the Kim Jong-un era, that makes me think that if we can help them continue to prioritize the economy, that will help reduce their reliance on the military and ethnic nationalism and the Kims as sort of the glue of their society. Because really it is a military first state. Even though Kim has now said our new line is an economic line first, there's decades of history, really going back to the 60s, where it's been a military first state. So I think we should be trying to help them become more of an economy first state. And then some of these other things we would like to see may be able to follow in the wake of that sort of transformation. So
all smiles in the photo op, that was very nice. It was, I suppose, a win-win for both President Trump and Chairman Kim. Of course, South Korean President Moon Jae-in was behind the doors, but it was a win for him because it seems like his sole purpose was to get North Korea's Kim Jong-un out of that closed territory and back to the talk. So it was a win for South Korean President Moon Jae-in as well. But now the real question is, where does it go from here? Starting with the working level meetings sometime in July, we're leading to the foreign ministers meeting, and finally, hopefully, a summit meeting within this particular year. So that's a very optimistic scenario, as a matter of fact, because we have a lot of pessimistic scenarios as well. I agree. Yeah. I think that would be a good timeline. The main outcome of this meeting really was the promise from both sides to get back to working level talks. And as I mentioned, because Mr. Trump has a lot of domestic issues to take care of, international foreign policy, Iran and Libya and some other, China. So I think he has to finish everything as soon as possible so they can get the maximum profits out of this kind of very important deal in this part of the world, because he has so many things on his political agenda, in his own agenda for the re-election next year. So that's why this is a kind of time constraint imposed not only by the North Korea but also by United States as well. This is very interesting how they're going to coincide with each other on what particular point in time.
That's really enticing to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important year, and after Hanoi, you know, it did seem like maybe this window had slipped away or was slipping away, and I think they've reopened that window, and how far through they can go in the coming weeks and months will be up to the negotiators and how flexible both sides are being in the coming weeks.
Right. I mean, I've been saying this for the past at least 10 years, but you know, the only thing predictable about North Korea is its unpredictability. So we'll have to wait and see what happens on that front. But you know, after the stalemate of the last few months, this appears to be the best opportunity to get diplomacy back on track. But as we all know, without a concrete agreed understanding of how North Korea will denuclearize, it'll just be a repeat of Hanoi all over again. So we'll have to keep our eyes on that, especially as U.S. and South Korean elections are coming up. You know, the political lineup isn't guaranteed in such favorable way for North Korea. Well, many thanks to both of you gentlemen for this talk.
My
Dr.
pleasure.
Kim Chang-su, advisor to the Korea Research Institute for National Strategy. Thank you so much. And Andray Abrahamian, fellow at the Shorenstein Stanford University 2018-2019. We appreciate your insights as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of our viewers for staying with us all throughout. As history is written in this part of the world, we'll be here to make sure you're kept up to each and every moment. Take care.